You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Under the Puppet is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who support the show over at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Welcome to Under the Puppet, the show that talks to professional puppeteers about the art and business of puppetry with the sole purpose of helping you up your puppet game. My name is Grandpa Choco, and this is Under the Puppet. Hello, friends, and welcome back. I am so excited for this episode of Under the Puppet because we finally get to sit down with puppeteer Leslie Carrara-Rudolph. This one means a lot to me as it was Leslie who believed in me enough to recommend me to begin training with the Jim Henson Company. I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for Leslie, so I'm glad I get to talk to her for this episode. Leslie got her puppetry start on Muppets Tonight, and since then she starred as Abby Cadabby on Sesame Street, Bubbles on the Jim Henson Company series Splash and Bubbles, and as her self-created puppet persona Lolly Lardpop doing outreach to kids across the world. Here now is my interview with Leslie Carrara-Rudolph. Leslie Carrara-Rudolph, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. You are someone who I've wanted on the show for a long time, and I'm super glad that the stars aligned and you're finally out here on the West Coast and we can chat.
Well, I'm here to see Harvey. It was
You're here
a good
to see
thing
Harvey.
that you were in the office when I came to visit.
My dog Harvey, and I connived Leslie into doing this interview.
Yes, as long as I can pet this dog while we're working on it.
That is your demand, and that can happen, and is currently happening. So let's talk about, we're going to talk a lot of things about puppetry, but let's go back. What is your first exposure to puppetry that you remember? Like, growing up or whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, this is, I'm from the Bay Area, and you are too.
San Francisco Bay Area.
Right.
Yeah.
So we would go to Fairyland.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know where
Yeah, over in Oakland, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a big deal. Like, we didn't have a lot of school field trips, so our school field trips were either to the zoo, the Nolan Zoo, or to Fairyland, and that was huge. And Louis Mallman, they would do the puppet shows there, and he did a variety of things, and I was just so enamored, actually, because my dad's was an artist and wanted to be an animator for Disney. I was just captured by characters. Like, I love characters so much. And I asked if I can go backstage afterwards, and he showed me the puppets, and they were made out of gourds, and I thought that was amazing. Later, I found out that Frank Oz worked with Louis Mallman. I don't think the timing was there. I don't think he was back there. I was past my time. But I just remembered that. So that would be probably my very first exposure to puppets. And then I think I just would puppeteer my own stuffed animals, not realizing that's what I was doing, and
right.
Interactive stuff. So that would be my first, I think, exposure.
Were you kind of, as a kid, were you always kind of like putting on shows? Like, hey, I'm going to put on a show with my stuffed animals.
I was constantly singing.
Yeah.
I was always making up songs. In my grandpa and grandma lived with me, and so our backyard, because I was a surprise, that's way into family, my siblings were a lot older than me, and I think I tell people I have ADHD TNT, which is explosive attention deficit disorder. So they were constantly putting me outside. My dad always had a playhouse for me. Like, there was always an outdoor space for me. Mm-hmm. So that was like my wonderland. And I was always making gnome homes for the frogs, fairies. So I was always keyed into this other world. Like, my imagination was constantly fed.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is. I just always feel like my whole life has been driven by my love for characters.
Yeah, you strike me as somebody who, you know how people see, like, they see faces and things? They go, oh, the knots in this wood make a face. You strike me as somebody who not only sees the face, you hear their voice, you have their whole backstory as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was encouraged.
Yeah.
Like, my grandpa, I guess my first exposure to puppets, now that I think about it, is my grandpa grabbed a snapdragon.
Oh, yeah.
And if you take an actual snapdragon and squeeze the corners of its mouth, they will talk to you.
Yeah.
So I just remember that everything is something.
Right.
Which is also a song I'll probably write. But so I really remember that being nurtured in my family. My grandpa would say, I took out a gnome home. You got to tell me where you build these things. He would hose them down.
Yeah.
So they played into it.
Yeah, and in case anybody was wondering, if you don't know, snapdragon is a flower. So we're not talking about any sort of creature or something like that.
To this day, they're my favorite flowers.
Yeah.
They remind me, and this is where life imitates art. I get sentimental, but now Abby on Sesame Street has a fairy garden, and there's snapdragons in the fairy garden, and I just think to myself, I pinch myself, I cry, I'm grateful every day, but I feel like, wow, like this is exactly what I was doing when I was 5 and 6 years old, and I'm doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Only fake snapdragons you can't make puppets out of. It's weird. For some reason, they don't work.
Real ones.
I tried it.
Yeah. Are you someone who decided at a young age you wanted to do puppetry, or was it more something you fell into, or just evolved into? Maybe
I think it evolved into I was really into the theater arts, and we were blessed in the Bay Area, Northern California. They had a lot of after-school programs, and again, because of my energy, I was in every after-school program known to mankind. I was in the recreation department. I started when I was 16, and so I just started working and performing with kids naturally and coming up with characters. And then I was with a theater company, Fantasy Forum Actors Ensemble, for 13 years, from the age of 16 on. And they would always cast me as like the dog. I was the dog. Mm-hmm. Or I was Pinocchio. And they would actually have to physicalize those characters. So I became just again, obsessed with characters first. And then because I was in that theater company, I took voice at a young age. I was in Godspell, and then I studied opera with Letha Wayne for about a year, and I was frustrated because I wanted to sing, more stuff. And then I studied with Lloyd Carrell and Kathy DeHaven, and Kathy was really wanting me to do more jazz at a young age, and Lloyd was more musical theater, and then Pam Brooks. So I studied voice, and the voice is really where I realized that it's an untapped instrument, and there's all these different levels. And then when I was with the theater company, we would do sometimes 2 different shows in a weekend. So I might be an evil queen one week, and I might be a different character, back to back. Mm-hmm. And so then I started studying voice with our musical director there, and she taught me to sing in character. So I was just obsessed with characters. And then when I started doing after school programs, I would make puppets with the kids, and we would talk about the voice. But I would make puppets out of slippers and socks. They weren't fancy puppets. So whenever I would perform or do birthday parties or schools, some of my characters would be me, because I feel like it's all about the character, and they're best served by, and then sometimes it would be a talking object or a puppet. So it was really has always been about characters for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's and then when I did Life in Other People's Shoes, where I would cartoon the character, and then a lot of people have heard me mention this in other podcasts, but I would cartoon the character, and I would put on shoes and then assume the identity that were found in those shoes. Someone from the Muppets came and said, we're looking for female comedians who can sing and do characters. And so that's when I went to the cattle call. And then on Muppets Tonight, Bill Beretta talked Brian Henson into hiring me because of my characters. And then it was sink or swim. That was when I was like, I'm going to be fired, and it's going to be epic. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Muppets Tonight. That was 21 years ago, by the way. Oh yeah.
My God. And I came late to the program. So I've been performing for years and writing and doing after-school programs and working for Disney and doing theater, Beggar Woman, Little Shop, Pump Boys and Dinettes, doing all chorus line. And it wasn't until my, I don't want to say how old, it wasn't until late in life I realized, wow, puppets, now there truly are no boundaries for what you can create.
Yeah. But about Muppets Tonight, what was it like? Because obviously you were aware of the Muppets. You knew the Muppets. You loved the Muppets.
Oh, yeah. I collected frogs.
Yeah.
So Kermit was everything to me, but my favorite Muppet is Ralph and Robin.
But what was it like? All of a sudden, it's like, oh, now you're going to be working on Muppets Tonight with all these Muppets.
I honestly
was it intimidating? I don't mean to interrupt you, but was it intimidating?
Oh, God, yes. Like I said, when I went through the audition process, it was literally a cattle call. It was 10 people every half hour for 2 days. And then I was called back with, I think, Louisette from the Groundlings. And I thought, I didn't think anything of it. For me, like, my heroes were obviously my dad, people in my family. I was obsessed with Jim Henson and Walt Disney because they created characters. They created worlds. And so my life was based on those worlds. I loved Waylon and Madam.
Right.
Lamb Chop. Like I said, I came through characters. So, yeah, oh my God. I thought, I have no business being here. They're going to find me out. They're going to fire me. The first meeting that I went to where they were just brainstorming ideas for characters. I don't know if I told you this, but it was Frank Oz, Kevin Clash, Brian Henson, Bill Beretta, Steve Whitmire, Dave Goles, and me, and Jerry Nelson.
Yeah.
And they looked like, and nobody knew who I was except for Brian and Bill. They just kind of said, this is here, this female's here. And I'm like, I couldn't speak. I did say one sentence. Do you want to know what it is?
Sure.
They were brainstorming ideas for space characters, and I carry a fish purse. I have for many years. People who know me that about me. And someone gave me a plastic brain that was filled with bubble gum, but I ate the bubble gum out, and I kept the plastic brain in the brain of my fish, and I would put my ideas in there, like I was working on, and I also put a screaming axe in the tail, so whenever I dropped my fish or if someone grabbed my purse, it screamed, and I knew
that somebody had your purse.
Right.
Yeah.
So they were trying to figure out what they were going to do, and someone said, if we only had a brain, like maybe it's just a brain on a finger, on the end of a hand, I go, oh, there's a brain in my fish purse. And they just looked at me like, what? And I grabbed my fish purse, and it screamed as I was pulling out the brain, and they just kind of looked at me. Nobody said anything. Kevin just looked at me. He took the brain, and they used it to brainstorm it, and then they stuck it on the table. And I was like, oh, God, what just happened? It was a nightmare.
But even though that may seem embarrassing, in the moment,
right.
You're like, oh, why did I say this? But it's like, you went back the next day, you're still, you know what I mean? Like, you're still working on the show. You didn't run away and hide because of embarrassment.
Well, you know what? I had the good fortune. Here's like, I guess for me, like, when I talk and when I go into schools, I am so corny that I really, truly believe that you follow your heart. And then but we had a loss in our family at a young age, and I was 11 when my brother was killed in a motorcycle accident, and that really does, like, the whole landscape of my life and my world changed then. And I knew that I was finite. I've kind of known this my whole life. I had a lot of loss before I was even 21. So I knew that my time here was limited. And this is what I think that's really interesting. In Hamilton, why do you write like you're running out of time, like you're running out of time? I mean, even Jim Henson himself, his brother Paul passed away and I feel like sometimes you learn early in life that we are here for such, like, you really do only live once a day. So every day has to count. Mm-hmm. You get to make that choice. What are you going to leave behind that day? And how are you going to embrace that day? So for me, I'm like, I'm going to make the most out of this day. When I was on Muppets Tonight, I thought, yeah, they're going to fire me at any moment. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I built my first Muppet. I met Paul Hardis. Heather Henson said, we're going to have a puppet slam. I said, I don't have a puppet. She says, you're going to make one. And I'm like, you're right. I'm going to make one. I made Madame Velveeta. I learned how to carve foam. Olin, who was our lighting designer. He gave me advice one time. I was doing Dulcie in Muppets Real World, and he came over to me and he goes, Les, and I watched everybody. I watched how everything came together, and he goes, you know what? If you step into the light when you give your monologue and then step back, it's going to make an impact. So he goes, try doing that. And he said that to me because I was approachable. I was learning about everybody's artistry. So I was talking about what it was like dealing with Rizzo or something like that. And I came into the light, and then I dipped my puppet's head back and I stepped back, and it was shrouded. Mm-hmm. And that moment was a moment. And then I was like, wow, there's gifts in every inch of your playing field. So I just watched everybody. I sat and I watched how everybody worked. I liked how Bill worked. I connected with him through acting, how his subtlety in movements and the broad movements. Everybody has their own unique style, but every puppet is unique too. I would watch someone pick up a puppet and see how it moved and how that character would inform the voice. So it was a master class. And I thought, I'm getting paid to take a master class. And if on my first day, I told you I thought I was going to be fired.
Yeah.
And it would have been epic. So.
Well, you made it through, and, you got to work with, legends in the puppetry world.
Yeah, and Jerry Nelson is really, I have to say, has been my Jim Henson. Mm-hmm. he always chose me to right hand for him, when I was truly the underdog. But he would say, you guys have those sweaty men in your armpits. Look what I have in mine, But I learned to breathe with him. Brian used to haze me. Oh my God, I had to be his right hand for Thor God of Thunder, and he would slam me into walls, and it was so hard to keep up with him. And I'm like, is this some sort of sick hazing? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh. And I think I was just too naive to know.
Yeah.
I think I was telling you, in the car on the way over here, I was just so grateful to be put in this situation and my dad was a teacher, so he would always say, life is your education. Just because you can't afford to go to a fancy college, or if you can't afford education, then be educated by the world around you. I think that's how I survived in those situations. I was like, I'm going to learn as much as I can before they fire me.
Yeah. I think every job you work on is a learning situation, wouldn't you say? Like, even if you're just starting out, or even today, it's always a learning situation.
I'm constantly learning. I take a lot of chances with my puppetry, and sometimes it looks awful and sometimes it looks good. I'm just a lot of times in between, especially on, Sesame Street or wherever you are, you see people, figuring out how to work with their puppets or their riffing. And it's just how to stay in character, how to keep your energy and your moment going. But for me, it's character.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask this actually later on, but I'll ask it now since this seems like a good segue. You're someone who gets to, you're on Sesame Street, and you're on Splash and Bubbles, was a recent Henson show, and so you
Nature Cat.
Yes, Nature Cat. But you get to work relatively often. Sure, we would all love to go every single day, and we don't get to do that. Yeah. But do you, as a puppeteer, do you practice pretty much every day, or do you at least put a puppet on your hand and try and work things out every day?
Well,
when there's time.
Well, first of all, Sesame Street is only 5 weeks out of the year. A lot of people think, you're so lucky. It's like we shoot for 5 weeks, and then we have a couple little things in between. And then Splash and Bubbles that hurt my brain so hard. That was that's another thing I was telling Johnny. I go, if you want to replace me, I totally understand. It's
John
okay.
Tartaglia is
Johnny T. Yeah. I've known him forever. So it's and it's basically Ginger Sprite as a fish. We're right next to each other. So I guess, yes, I work every single day on my characters. Like, most of the time, I'm evolving Lolly and Granny Dot and, or working on a character either artistically or writing them. Not necessarily a puppet on my hand, but every day I work on a character.
Yeah.
I know, or write in character, or think about something, or draw something, but that's because I have a problem, Grant. I wrote a joke called "My Mind Has a Mind of Its Own," and it does. Like Lolly has her own journal,
Yeah.
and so does Granny Dot.
Yeah.
Like my characters now have journals.
Well, this is a perfect segue into actually the next question on the paper. Is you're someone I know who carries a journal or a notebook around with you. Can you talk about the benefits of doing that?
Okay, well, let's just open my fish right now and see what I have in here. So I came light. So I only have 1, 2 in my fish. I only have 3 journals. I have the Passport to Oz. This one has an etching from my brothers, Born to be Free, reminding me again that we're here for a little bit of time. So the Oz and You, is basically the characters. Let me just read from it. Oh my gosh, do you mind? I'm just going to do a quick little one because they all have a different theme.
I love creative journals, so this is awesome.
Okay, the characters you meet. So the Oz and You was basically, I love middle schoolers. Nobody writes for them. I love them. They're werewolves. They need us more than everything because they don't realize they have the tools and the powers in them that make them unique, and especially with all the technology out there that they escape into. I work with kids at risk, so girls that are cutting, girls with eating disorders, girls and boys, and I feel like they pick up the video games so they can escape and have a break from all the pressures of all the testing and everything, but it doesn't occur to them that they can pick up a pencil and do the same things, and especially now with all the devastation in the world where kids are left without stuff. They need to know that they still have themselves. So the characters that you meet on your journey that teach you courage, wisdom, love to lead you home, and home is yourself. And who you meet on the yellow brick road. So I thought this journal is all dedicated to this, helping kids find the Oz in you, the characters that will guide them. Who's your fairy godmother? Who's your mother? Who are your influence? What are your goals? Who's your Toto? Spider is this guy that roams the streets on Queens. He's so quirky. Spider roams the streets where I live in Queens. We started to know each other by saying hello. I'd give him $1. Now he doesn't ask. So I just find characters, and I thought, well, how is this person helping me on my journey? This journal is for my cabaret that I was working on, What Just Happened. I write like a set list, and then what I do too for everything that I put in a show, it has to have a reason. So there's like a mission statement, like why is this piece in my show? What is this going to? This one says my truth, and this I wrote on January 1st, which was a scary time for us people. After the election and what was happening. And you can see there's a drawing of me with Lolly on my hand holding an arrow that says joy, and she has a heart with wings, and the arts that are coming out of my pencil. So this is another journal that just holds me accountable. It has Granny Dot and what her purpose on my journey is. She's the senior. I'm big on seniors, and then so light, spontaneity, angel cards. I have a problem. And then the journals that I really love are the ones that have things in the back, little pockets in the back.
Like pockets in the back, yeah.
Yeah, that I can put some stuff on.
So you would recommend to artists a journal is a good thing? Or multiple journals? Multiple
journals. I like these little ones that I can carry in my purse so that I can, do a brain dump.
Well, you have played... a lot of characters with the Muppets and on Sesame Street and currently on Splash and Bubbles and things like that. But one of the things I totally admire you for, and you're an inspiration for me in this, is your own created characters and the things you do with them. And I'm especially talking about a character named Lolly Lardpop. And could you tell us, you have a little pipe cleaner, Lolly.
Lolly
there.
has a puppet of herself.
She has a puppet of herself. Of course she does. She has a journal. Why wouldn't she have a puppet of herself?
She has a journal and a puppet of herself.
But can you tell us a little bit about the creation of Lolly Lardpop? Where did she come from?
Oh my gosh, this is so funny. So Lolly is my little Phoenix Rising. I had a show that, I talked about, like, my first show was Life in Other People's Shoes, where I would cartoon characters and then I would go into them. And then I had another show where it was just for Madame Velveeta, but it was Madame Garbanzo's Wahoo Wagon. And sometimes I would just pick a character and let that character do a show. And then I had an opportunity to take all my characters out and do a bigger show, which through that, I got a great opportunity, but I also was very naive in the business world and thinking the rights would come back to me after this show was done. They did not. It was I met a lot of wonderful people, and I also learned a lot of life lessons, mostly about show business. And so when that show was over, I couldn't use my characters, and I was like losing my family, and my friend asked me to sing in a cabaret. It was my friend from the Bay Area, and she goes, Leslie, you were a singer. You used to do theater all the time. Before I knew you, before you picked up a puppet, why don't you come do a cabaret? And that singing will help you back to yourself. Because I was like, what am I doing? And so that's Irene Soderbergh. And so but I was scared because I'd hidden behind all these characters. So I called Miss Coco Peru, who's someone I admire. She's a drag queen. She's fantastic. And one of the most brilliant monologists ever, Monologue, if you've seen her shows. And I just had Miss Coco is just like my hero in writing. And I really inspired me in the one-person show, along with, of course, Lily Tomlin and people that you study. But she said, I said, Clinton, what do I do? I'm so nervous. Can you give me advice? And she's like, well, why don't you just make a puppet, and do that, get it over with, and then sing. Then you've done something you're comfortable with. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what I'll do. When's your show? I'm like, it's tonight. So literally, I just threw Lolly together in a half hour. It was during the Halloween time. So I had these Pippi Longstocking braids, and I twisted it up. It came straight up. It was like an exclamation point. So her design looks like she's always excited to see you. And based on my friend Michael, who's another drag queen, his character, Miss Texas, was straight up like Lolly. So it was a shout out to him. I literally asked, I don't have any arm rods or anything. I don't know what to do. And Allison Mork says, well, if you come by, I'm helping Wayne White with his installation on the way to your cabaret, pick up the arm rods. And I just literally put them on her the night of my cabaret.
Yeah.
And I also won a drag competition, the Queen of Silver Lake. And so that's another story, but that's another character. And so I had a lot of people come to this show, and I put Lolly on to sing Candyman, and she didn't get to her song for about 10 minutes because she was going through the audience. I need candy before I get started, and I know there's a mint in someone's purse. And it was just like an incoming. And then I put her down, I sang my song, and then after the show, I was really proud. I wore a dress. I looked like, Leslie, that was amazing. Can Lolly please be on my show? And I'm like, what? And so then Lolly started getting work. And so she just kind of came in. She was just an unbridled, fearless. I was talking to my musical director today, one of them, and even John DeHaas, Lolly's you. And I'm like, what? But she's way more confident than I am. Yeah. She is fearless. I know it sounds corny and we're the same person, but she really is a character that doesn't know that she can't make a difference, so she's that part of me that a child shall lead us, so she surrenders to that.
Yeah. What I love about Lolly is that she has sort of tackled all sorts of mediums.
Yes.
She's a live show. You do videos for her on YouTube. She has a podcast that's all audio, but sometimes video. And do you like exploring these different avenues with Lolly?
Oh, yeah. I love it. I started last year a Dear Diarrhea. Like Lolly yells, Dear Diarrhea. So I started doing a daily diarrhea for Lolly in her journal. And they're kind of fun. And I'm doing some like her cartooning. The podcast, a couple of the podcasts like Cookie Queen Conundrum and Attack of the Space Splat. And I'm going to make into comic books. I took the story that I did with you. Remember you helped me the night before Hallow Scream? Mm-hmm. I made into a comic book, coloring book that in both in English and Spanish, just kind of not judged myself because I was like, this is her style of drawing. And I was able to send that out to kids and parents and teachers just to download, especially with what's going on in shelters and stuff. So I love that. And I love that Lolly has a world, like the Twin Turtles Mobile Park. And she has Granny Doris, but she also has Granny Dot. So she has like real world friends and she has her imaginary world friends, like her Sasquatch and her pink ninja monkeys. Mm-hmm. And Attack of the Space Splat is now the backstory of why those monkeys are pink.
Right.
And all this shelter. And I also have to say that, Grant, you inspired me with your podcast, Dr. Floyd's. And, I love listening to podcasts and radio shows and characters. So I think a lot of it is just me. I'm an escape artist. So I love that I love creating worlds. Mm-hmm. I love it.
Well, I will put links to Lolly's websites in the show notes, so people want to go check that out. Oh,
and you can download that coloring book.
Okay, yeah. Just give me the link, and I will put that in there. Well, Lolly has a show you mentioned earlier about Leslie and Lolly Make Stuff Up, but she also has Wake Up You're Weird, which is a great live stage show as well. And could you talk a little bit about the challenges of putting together a live show like that?
Oh, God. Yes. Okay, so first, Wake Up You're Weird was epic, and you were with me on that journey. That was just like a love letter to my dad, and also my my outreach work, child development through the arts, helping kids to compartmentalize their feelings and using the arts as a way of expressing who they are. So it has puppetry and music and artwork and found objects and shadow puppets. It has all kinds of. That show, Wake Up You're Weird, was multimedia, and I learned a lot on that show, but it's also so multimedia that it's parked right now because it's hard to tour. There's a lot of different elements, and for me, I'm not so great at the business side. You know this about me. I just have to do it, and then, how do I keep putting it out there? So, but the second act of that show, which is me showing kids how I do it, which originally was called Wake Up You're Weird. The show was called Entertaining a Thought, and then it was called Wake Up You're Weird. The second act is now Lolly and Leslie Make Stuff Up. So the challenges of having a multimedia touring show, and the more people you add, that cranks the expenses up, scheduling, all kinds of things like that. What I found is the second act is easy for me to tour because it's just me. Mm-hmm. And then the Oz and You is just me coming with a suitcase and speaking. It's kind of like doing stand-up comedy with a purpose in middle schools. And then I can go into classrooms. So I feel like the bigger you go, the more expenses, the more you need someone to help you with the tour managing. And also, too, I like to make everything. So sometimes it's better to ask people to do certain jobs, and sometimes your idea is different than the people you ask. So there's all kinds of little things that, like, the set design really make sure it's something that is going to be tourable and something that is going to be simple, and think about that. Mm-hmm. Whatever's going to simplify that. Now in my radio show style podcast, it's a live show. I have a band. when we do a live show, I use the students at the art house. So the band, we've got it down to a science. Like we have Broadway ringers that are the Red Hot Lemonheads. They come in. Paul is teaches them the songs. I have one rehearsal with my live accompanist because it's all underscored. And then we rehearse. We do the show once, and then we go live. Mm-hmm. And then we have the audience. So every show has a different approach. So live shows are tricky. For me, right now, I really love doing my cabaret because it's just me and an accompanist and a couple friends come in. It's basically like an evening of what just happened, stories and music and comedy and whimsy. And that I know, like, if somebody asks me, can you do this show? I think to myself, okay, what do I have the week before? It's vocally, yeah, I can do this show. Yeah, I can do the show with one rehearsal, a brush up and go. What if someone says, can you do Wake Up You're Weird? It has to be in a theater. I have to have a week of rehearsal. There has to be timing. We have to do this. Mm-hmm. Leslie and Lolly make stuff up. Yeah, I can do that. I just need to know if you have a sound system and a piano. So I think every show is completely different. Yeah. Does that help and answer questions?
Yeah, no, it does.
And keep track of your expenses. I'm terrible. I always end up paying everybody except for me.
Well, the good thing about a show like that, like creating a show like that, is, as you said, the second act of Wake Up You're Weird can be its own show.
Right.
And you can borrow things from different shows to create new shows. Like you have like a little, I don't know what you call them, like little blocks of, like, oh, during this block I do this thing, but I can put that in this show.
Yes.
And so you can kind of adapt the show to whatever. So if you do get a big theater that wants you to do the show, you can do Wake Up You're Weird, you know. But if you have a smaller outreach thing that's just in a school cafeteria or whatever, you can do something else.
One of the cool things is I am going to go back and look at Wake Up You're Weird and see if I can simplify it with puppetry and maybe just have 3 people. When we did Wake Up You're Weird and you were on this journey with me, we were trying to figure out the thought bubbles. Mm-hmm. And we're like, also, but when the reason we chose video was for a reason, because we ironically, kids like focused really hyper when they were looking at visual things. We were also taking them on the journey of the mind, and it was a lot for them to digest. So we tried to pick visuals and things that we thought would be the easiest to follow. I just did a show at this school for kids on the spectrum, ages 4 to 24, all nonverbal. And there was 300 kids, and she says, I want you to do a show. Imagine that age limit and nonverbal. And first thing I said to them, I'm like, that's not fair to put 300 kids in one room. Let's do 2 shows. And the lady was shaking. She goes, I wanted to ask you, but I was afraid. And I'm like, no, don't be afraid. Like, one of the things is, if you're going to put the same energy you're going to put into one show, mm-hmm. if you can break it up into 2 shows, it's better for the audience. I always consider the audience first. I just got asked to do a show for kindergarten through 5th grade. It's tricky. It's going to be hard to have kindergartners in with 5th graders. It's not fair, the attention span. So, and I said, can I do a library show for the kindergartners and then do that show? Well, we figured out Leslie and Lolly make stuff up. If we do the show that has music, we can do that. Like, they can sit through that. Kids can, so you're going to have lots of little challenges. And the more that you can pick. I ended up writing a show for the kids on the spectrum. I told my accompanist, I go, there's going to be Tourette's. There's going to be kids running up. This one kid ran up a couple times. He was, I think, maybe 19 years old. He'd run up in the middle of the show and he said, Lolly, Kylo Ren is on his way to the building. And Lolly's like, it is okay. The force is strong with me. I got this. The force is strong in me. And then pretty soon the accompanist would play Star Wars Bank underneath me. And so now I have a show that's specifically for kids on the spectrum. And I wrote a song called New Place, New Space, New Face, So always say yes if you can.
Yeah.
And then challenge yourself to adapt something.
Yeah, that's incredible advice right there. Talking about just one last thing about Wake Up You're Weird, but we'll tie it back to puppetry. One of the things I loved about Wake Up You're Weird is that it had live puppets that were, hand puppets in Lolly, but then also full body puppets like
Velvet L'Amour, which I have been in a box for almost 2 years, Grant.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Velvet.
I am too.
And Slacks, but then you also had a shadow puppetry segment, and you also had these video puppetry segments. Do you like exploring other forms of puppetry other than just we'll say the Henson style of hand puppet?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like such a novice. There's so many brilliant puppeteers out. I mean, if I could go back to school, I would in a heartbeat. And this is where my dad comes in, like, well, then see as much theater as possible and talk to as many artists as possible, like James Godwin and Ronnie Burkett and Tim Lagasse, like Jim Napolitano. Like, these are monster artists are just brilliant, the O'Neill Puppetry Conference, David Bazzaro. I'm just constantly learning from the people around me. We chose shadow puppetry for the bullying section specifically of Wake Up You're Weird because we didn't want to put a face on a bully. We wanted it, and it was about stupid, ugly, not good enough, mind, body, spirit, how you bully yourself and how we feel bullied. So we chose that form because artistically that made the most sense. And then kids could deal with the shadowing. The one thing I will say about Wake Up You're Weird is the workbook is really good. So now I have all that content. And once you create content, that can go anywhere. That can become anything.
As a puppeteer, you're often called to audition. And I would love to know what you do to kind of prepare for an audition. And you also do voiceover as well. So for voiceover audition as well. But how do you as a performer get ready for an audition?
Oh, okay. There's so many different ways. Well, one of the things is get as much information as you can about the show as possible. For voiceover auditions, they give you the sides. They give you a description. I think that you should have 3 ideas. Like, this is strictly for voiceover. You have 3 different takes on the character. 2 that you think are obvious and 1 that is just ridiculous. And I remember for Tough Puppy, I did Peg Puppy, and for whatever reason, I decided that was going to be his mother. What are you doing? And nobody did that voice. I ended up getting the job. It was awesome. Butch Hartman goes, oh my God. It was just so. It's also remember that you're giving them an opportunity to know what your skills are. So if you have a chance to show your range, please do so. I remember when I met Norman Lear, I said to myself, it's not that I get to meet Norman Lear, it's that Norman Lear gets to meet me. And Norman Lear had said, say yes to everything after I met him. And I just thought, I'm just going to share what it is I bring to the table. When I got to audition for Nightmare Before Christmas. That was back in the day. I was doing Beach Blanket Babylon, and someone came to the show and then asked us to audition. And our sides, literally our audition piece was to sing Making Christmas. Making Christmas, or This is Halloween. This is Halloween. And we had to sing in as many characters as possible for our audition. So for that, when you do multiple characters, I set it up so vocally my ranges were completely different. So this is Halloween. This is, so I sound awful. And I just swallowed my gum as I did that. Charming. So, you do a lot of vocal warm-ups and things like that. So there's that. And then for puppetry auditions, I remember auditioning for Johnny and the Sprites with Lolly in my backyard in the garden, and she sang Somewhere That's Green. And that was so weird because that was the only puppet I had. And she was singing that. And then I went back in to an audition in New York, and I had the puppet on my hand, and I was auditioning with another puppeteer who I cannot say who it was. But our improv was not going well. Mm-hmm. And I remember, because I wasn't getting anything from him, and I remember grabbing the puppeteer with my puppet going, "I'm trying to be nice!" And it turned out that Johnny said, "That's what got you. That showed you the level." So it's not just the level of your vocal ability, but I think that the more authentic and truthful you are with your character, and when you know the sides, still put them up, but be as memorized as possible. So you are not completely locked into it, and then also come up like with a backstory for your character. If it's not on the page, write a journal for your character. Yeah. For Abby Cadabby, our audition, my callback was 2 sides in a song, but it was with Fran Brill, and we literally, Kevin sent me my audition, and Fran and I improv for 15 minutes solid, just Zoe and Abby going back and forth. And they were testing my vocal range. They were seeing what our sense of humor was. And luckily, it was about a fairy and her fairy garden.
Right.
And I've lived in one my whole life. So it was the improv and the story and the authenticity of the character.
Yeah.
That's a long, long answer.
Well, it's a perfect answer. And I think
it's homework. You do your homework. You know, you really do take the time to prepare, but I always think like the if you're holding a character that they don't know what the character is, and you can give them ideas, they're gonna love that.
Yeah. Have you ever and maybe you don't have to necessarily name names, but have you ever had to play a character that you didn't like because like maybe you don't agree with the personality of the character or something like that?
Well, I laugh when I had to do Madonna in Beach Blanket Babylon. I was like working with kids, and it was during the blonde admission. I was like, "What?" But I spoofed her, so my mole was the size of a quarter. Have I ever played a character that I didn't like? That is a really good question because I'm trying to think back. So there was a project, Crank Yankers, right? Mm-hmm. And I loved all the puppeteers. I think it was, they were wonderful people, and I wanted to work with them. And it was so funny because for the audition, I was supposed to memorize, to do the lip syncing. Right. And it was a character that was a special needs character. And I couldn't do it because I physically couldn't do it because of my outreach stuff. It wasn't a judgment on anybody, mm-hmm. but I was painting windows at the time for the holidays, and I realized my holiday windows, my elves looked really anxious and uncomfortable and not happy because I was used to listening to Christmas music, and I thought, if I have to listen to content over and over again and get behind it, and it's making my insides not feel right, I can't do it. And it's not that, like I said again, and there was another project I had to pass on because I just was struggling inside with the content. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to do it. So as of now, I haven't played a character that I haven't.
Well, but this brings up a good point.
Does that make sense?
It does.
I mean, there's certainly unlikable characters because they're the villain, like Miss Inappropriate.
And you can find something to love about those characters if you're the performer.
Oh, my God. Miss Inappropriate is a character I do on the side for people that know me, and she is so dark. Yeah. She's so dark and awful.
But what I love about what you just said is that I think, as a puppeteer, any kind of performer, and you get in this thing where it's like, well, if they offer me a job, I have to say yes.
I have to do it, and I'm going to work with this person, and they're going to be so wonderful, and it's going to be so cool, and it's going to be great.
But it's okay to say no if the project or the part does not agree with you.
Yeah, and you know what? And the other thing too, I think is really important as a performer. I'm super blessed. My husband Paul Rudolph is awesome, and he knows me, and he knows my heart. And I'll say, listen, I'm thinking. He's like, no. I know how it's going to make you feel. You can't. And also, I'm starting to get emotional. I can't believe it. Abby is amazing to me because she lives off the page, and the outreach we do and hugging kids. And one of my favorite things I do nowadays is Kids Comic-Con, where I work with kids and I say, look, you're awesome. You know, and little girls come up and I'm like, you can choose the high road. You can create characters that are wonderful. So I can't not do it myself. You know, if I can't walk my talk, then I can't do those things. And again, I'm not making any judgments on any other women say, oh, it's separate. You're an actress. You can do it. I can't separate myself.
Yeah.
And also, too, I've been through a lot. This puppeteering life, Grant, I came to it late. I, waited. I did a lot of other jobs. There's some really lucky folks out there that just went straight into puppery, and that's all they've done. But I think I really relish the times that I have downtime, because that's what really makes you. I don't wait for the phone to ring before I work. And, Cheetah Rivera says that I'm a gypsy, and I am a gypsy. I create work. I started when I was 16 painting windows and doing after school programs, and everything I've ever done, and every job, most of the work that I've got, like working with Eric Idle, is because I volunteered or I did something as a favor to someone. I helped a friend out, and through that, I ended up making sheep for Eric Idle.
Yeah.
That's weird. But so I think you are going to have those hard questions, but know that when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And I highly suggest when you say no to a project that you wanted to do for whatever reason, your stomach and your heart wouldn't let you do it, then turn right around and create something on your own.
Yeah.
And don't take things personally.
Yeah.
If you're not in the room where it happened, then you're just not supposed to be in that room.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, I would like to ask you, what has been the highlight or a couple highlights of your career your puppetry career so far?
Oh, wow. Well, I have to say one of the highlight for me as a female performer, and I don't even know if a lot of people know that, was reading The Night Before Christmas with First Lady Michelle Obama to our on the Christmas tree lighting was epic, because it was the first time Abby was out there unaccompanied by any other male characters or characters. She was just her and the First Lady, who I incredibly respect. And then that night, I got to meet our president. I did not know. That was kind of crazy. And I went in and I had Abby on my hand. And when I saw Barack Obama, I'm like, what are you doing here? I was like, what? So I think for me, I was sitting that night. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all downhill from here. But then a couple weeks ago, I met Quincy Jones. But I have to say the highlight of my career is actually the direct interaction with kids. It's when, and I call it soul hugged all the time. It's when you put a character on your hand and the kid is just so opened up, or the child needs a hug. So that would be it. And then, oh my gosh, I think I just love live stuff. I don't know. There's so many moments, and I'm going to walk away, and I'm not going to, Lolly's going to be angry that I didn't bring up a time with her. But,
well, that was assumed. We'll just say that's assumed.
Every time I put Lolly on, it's a career epic moment for me.
Yeah. Well, if people want to find you online and connect with you and see this podcast and stuff, we'll put links, but where can they go?
Okay. So first of all, I'm horrible at Facebook, people. I post as Lolly, which I didn't realize my Facebook post goes into Twitter. So those of you who follow me on Twitter, I apologize if I don't respond back. I haven't figured that out. I'm going to fix it up. So maybe I'm going to ask Grant to help me. But Lolly Lardpop on Facebook, LeslieCarrara-Rudolph.com, Wake Up Your Weird we're kind of phasing out just because I can't do that show, but I think you can still write there. Grant helps me with that time to time. Lolly's Radio Playdate, I think you can reach out there. That is such a fun podcast. Please, I started a summer camp series, but we all been so busy that summer camp is still going and probably won't end till January. Let me see. And on Instagram, Lolly Lard Pop. Yeah, I think that's all of them. I try to do everything. I'm constantly calling Grant and saying, please help me. I'm terrible.
Well, Leslie, I'm so grateful that you came by and shared your joy with us today. And I just really appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thank you.
And that was my interview with Leslie Carrara-Rudolph. Shortly after we spoke, she called me and said she had forgotten a super important career highlight. I told her to record what it was on her phone and then send it to me. Here now is that extra bonus recording.
One of the things that I'm most excited and proud about was the way the puppeteering community came together and rallied around our friend Becky Ray. So Becky Ray was, had a lot of health issues happening revolving around her lupus, and so she needed a kidney. And I'm a horrible social media person. I'm so bad at Facebook, and I happened upon it, and I called her up, and I talked to her, and realized her reality is that she really needed a donor, and quick. She was on dialysis for 12 hours a day, every day. It was a lot. So honestly, you can find out about it because we rallied together and thought, what could we do? What could we do to make people aware of her situation? Because I didn't think they realized her reality. So I talked to Becky, and we were joking around with Lolly, which is how you find humor in the midst of darkness, is why we talk about how light can balance everything. Lolly I had her on the phone. I'm like, too bad we can't just audition kidneys for you. And we laughed. I'm like, yeah, we can audition people to tell them what the requirements are for the part of your kidney. And then we thought, well, why can't we? Why can't we put together a video that combines puppetry and reality in our own outreach video? I had been working on a concept that I created called Heart Skills, HEART, Humanity, Education, Art, Resources, and Truth, based on service learning approach to creating art that makes an impact in communities and families that my best buddy, Wayno, as a middle school teacher, uses when she does outreach. And I'm like, well, I'm going to apply these principles. So the humanity is Becky Ray's kidney. The education is education in every aspect of what we need to give her what she needs. The reality, the science, the medical situations, everything that goes into that. What art form is going to serve this? That would be video, because that's the best way to get it out. We can put it on social media and let people see this and become aware of it. What are our resources? We have none. So what are our human resources? What are our natural resources? And to shine a light on the truth, which is, this is the reality. So for resources, I just put the word out to everybody in the puppetry community that knows Becky Ray, and everybody came back. Z and Chad said, we can't actually be there, but we can edit this video for you. Bo Brown and Daryl Hazelrig and Elizabeth Leary, they were all in Atlanta because Becky couldn't go anywhere. So I used my frequent flyer miles. We flew to Atlanta. They showed up with all the lighting and the video equipment. I dressed up the Milano cookies as kidneys. Lolly showed up, and I'm not going to say anything. You just have to watch the video because this is a very long story. But in short, we shot some of it in Atlanta. Becky was in charge of what the content was because this was her story. And then we shot some of it back. Lars and people showed up at my apartment, and we shot more content there. My husband helped with the music, and then we put it out in September, out into the world. And by Christmas or January, I remember Becky calling me and says, we have a donor. So she had a donor and is an incredible woman that knows Lauren Waltz, who is really involved with helping animals, and she is a real-life hero. She didn't even know Becky. She actually made her own kidney puppet, which his name is Jeremiah, and she says, I want to do this. I know what it takes. I'm a match, and Becky has a kidney. And I just, honestly, the way that that community came together and said, they saved her life. Becky's family is the most loving, kind, wonderful family you can possibly imagine. And they opened their home. We just kind of went in and we did this. So I think out of everything that I've had so many incredible experiences, but that's probably the best thing ever. And it gave me hope, and it still lifts me no matter what situation I am in. And I'm so grateful to be part of such an incredible, artistic, loving community that would drop everything they're doing and, and rally to make a difference. This is a really long story, but I really think it's worth listening to because it's really not about me. It's about the human spirit and about how kindness and about how anything is possible. And so no idea is too small, and when you put wings on it with everybody coming together, you can make a difference. So thank you for letting me add this on, Grant, because I just am so grateful on a daily basis, but mostly just grateful for all the people that inspire me on a daily basis. All right, joy to all. Bye.
My thanks to Leslie Carrara-Rudolph for being on this episode. For a link to Leslie's website and more, visit the show notes for this episode number 11, over at underthepuppet.com. Finally, I wanted to talk briefly about a lesson I learned recently about not being afraid to speak up for yourself when it comes to your puppetry work. I'm currently without an agent, so when there are problems with contracts, I have to speak up for myself, something that makes me pretty uneasy. I spent all day on a recent production worried that I was going to be taken advantage of when it came to getting properly paid for my work. In the end, all it took was for me to go to the producer and politely say, "Excuse me," and explain my situation, and just like that, all was right with the project. I'd spent the whole day worried about something that was really nothing once I spoke up. Do not be afraid to speak up for yourself. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. I welcome your feedback via email at hello@SaturdayMorningMedia.com or via Twitter, where the show is at username Under the Puppet. You can also like us on Facebook, where you can find the show's page by searching Under the Puppet. I want to hear your suggestions for questions I should be asking and for future guests. Also, the goal for this show is to talk to puppeteers making it happen in all sorts of styles of puppetry. So if you know an amazing Bunraku or shadow puppet artist, please reach out. Let me know who I should be talking to. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to you next time on Under the Puppet. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Myrn Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Steven Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Dave Slesher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Pachoco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi from the Technorama Podcast, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wabshall, Twitter user Butts and Gear, a.k.a. Wildcat, Eve Cunning, Mike Hamilton, Gaston Moreno, Reed Loveland, Ivan Asquith, Vanessa Whitney, Janine Lee, Peggy Etra, Kristen Hogan of Squid Friends, David Akers, Zoe Palladino, Ellen Multari, Christopher Harris, Rachel Jackson of Vox Fabuli Puppets, Carolyn Weisner, John Petty, Rachel Hansen, Darcy Prevost, Fernando Torres, Ron McAdams, Perlicue Magic, Jason Domer, Trent Hammond, Roman and Emmett, Cora Goodall, Lee Barrett, Casino Skunk, The Misty Minute, Peter Capesser, Night Gig Studios, Joelle Reckfertig, and Adrian Rose Leonard. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly donation today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. And while you're over there in the iTunes Apple Podcast directory, be sure to click that subscribe button. That way you'll get new episodes the moment they are released. Under the Puppet is copyright 2017 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Pachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.SaturdayMorningMedia.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.